industry. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Letter of Law Interviews. My name is Sarthak Bhardwaj, and in the eighth episode of this interview series, I am absolutely thrilled and delighted to be in conversation with Mr. Apar Gupta. If you're watching this video, chances are you probably know all about Sir, and seeing Sir's name on the video title is why you've probably clicked on the video. But if you don't, I'll very quickly introduce Sir. Sir is, of course, a lawyer. He's also the founder and the executive director of the Internet Freedom Foundation. He is also an Ashoka Fellow. He has authored a book on a commentary on the Information Technology Act and has recently been added to BW Legal World's list of 40 under 40. Sir, I'm so honored and privileged to be in conversation with you today. Thank you so much for taking time out and being here with me.
Sarthak, thank you so much. I'm sharing that honor and privilege for um, all the audience which is tuned into this and giving up their time. Also, thank you so much for providing me this opportunity. Please feel free to address me as Apar. All of my colleagues call me Apar. And I think that breaks the bounds of hierarchy and formality, which are unduly present there in the legal profession. But it's up to your comfort. But people usually just refer to me as Apar, and that's good by me. Excited and looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thank you, Apar. Actually, it's nice of you to address that there's a lot of hierarchy within the legal system. I think as students, we've all witnessed that when we go for internships and other such places. So Apar, to start this off, although we have been in lockdown for over a year now and a lot of work has come to a
Yeah.
grinding halt, yet
Yeah.
the kind of work that you're involved in, digital rights and internet freedom, I think
Yeah.
its relevance has only grown in these times. So, how have you been keeping yourself busy while all of us have found a little bit of extra time on our hands? What are the kind of things that you've been involved in? How you've been keeping yourself busy, and what's been going on?
So I like to give a perspective which is a bit of broader than work because
Yeah,
personal health wellness has been a core factor which has impacted people's work cycles as well. Keeping that in mind, I think maintain a degree of discipline in terms of my sleep cycle, regular exercise, having a balanced diet has definitely helped. And also having a very positive collegial atmosphere with colleagues, some of them who are in their mid to early 20s, has been excellent. In some ways, I think it's work which has kept us going, which has helped us overcome the sense of captivity during this pandemic, in which our freedom to um, physically congregate,
yeah,
meet members of our family, or just attend classes, that spatial comfort which we get by seeing a person in person, which is nowhere near the experience of a Zoom call,
yeah.
irrespective of us trying out Zoom parties fairly early on during the lockdown. And now, if you mention a Zoom party, it would be a party of one. So it kept us going. Digitization has increased tremendously over this period of time because remote learning, as well as internet access as a method to conduct business, work with colleagues, but also ensure that we can be in touch with our friends and family, has deepened our dependency on digital communication platforms and devices. Thankfully, it's not only now restricted to elite and privileged sects of Indian society. There's a greater amount of democratization happening with cheaper smartphones and availability of high speed internet. However, there are complications which are accompanying that. It's still primarily based on a person's financial ability
Mhm.
rather than a universalized access. Secondly, that universalized access, when is it still a distant dream? People who do have access at present negotiate it with varying forms of surveillance, breaches to their personal privacy through vast, pervasive collection of um, their personal data, which remains without regulation,
Yeah.
blocking of websites, network neutrality violations, internet shutdowns, also social media toxicity, online abuse. There's a wide area in of engagement
Yeah.
because as our lives become much more closely connected with the internet and digital communication technologies, the technologies and the governance frameworks for them still are in a process of evolution, and even first principles for them sometimes need to be set.
That's actually very interesting about the government's interference with the internet rights, and how greater digitalization hasn't actually been equitable. So we will talk about all of that, but first I want to talk a little bit about you, and get to know you better and help our viewers to know you better as well. So Apar, why don't you start by telling us about how you first got interested in law, and how your law school journey was like. I know that's going a little too back, but I think that's the right place to start.
This may be a little self-indulgent as well. So, but I've always been fairly transparent about my own journey, um, because when you gave my introduction, it was primarily about the successes that I had. I'd like to tell people also that the journey has been one of crippling failures, but not regrets, because they've given me a sense to reconsider, pause, and come back. Secondly, it's an outcome of tremendous amounts of social privilege in which I come from a economic background which has tremendous comfort. I come from a business class family.
Yeah.
I've been well educated in English medium schools, and a lot of people are not having these same privileges. Even people who are in law school right now, elite law schools, they've overcome tremendous barriers. So here's a
Definitely.
shout out to them and what
Yeah.
they are doing. And just to let you know that despite these privileges, it's incredibly tough and challenging, but my privilege makes it easy to negotiate it. And for a lot of people, it does not exist. So please do reach out. I don't have a tremendous amounts of time, but wherever I can help, I offer help. In terms of my own law school journey, I picked up the law because I had a stammer in school. So I firstly got into debate competitions as a method towards improving my own levels of self confidence as well as grasp over the English language. I used to practice in front of a mirror, debating on a topic which I had read through the op-ed pages of the Hindu, or articles from Frontline, or the Indian Express, again, the op-ed pages, and speaking on a subject which may sound fairly neurotic in front of a mirror, and practicing elocution, and and subsequent from that, getting into the debate team. I was always into athletics, swimming, etc. So a lot of those compliments came in, and I gravitated towards the law, um, factoring in that public elocution with the opportunity towards making a living is something as a core skill within the law, not
Yeah.
recognizing it comes with so many other areas. So that's
Definitely.
what got me started. I gave my law entrances. I was successful in certain gaining admission to certain law schools, which are now national law schools, well recognized in 2002. But at that point in time, again, this is a product of my family background, being based in Delhi. We have a fairly large family here, and just seeing the level of comfort I would get, and also being a first generation professional, I decided to remain rooted in Delhi. So the law school, which was there at that point in time, and these were early days.
Yeah.
This was around 2000. In 2002, I took admission in Amity Law School. I missed out from National Law School by about 0.25 marks. I was ranked 65, and counseling went up to 63. And during the first few years of law school, I took it rather personally, but in the longer course of time, I don't think so that matters if you keep um, working at it. And I invested a lot of my time and energy, not only towards scholastic achievement, but in the early part towards moot court competitions, which again come with their own sets of complications. I think they promote a level of egoism and sometimes unhealthy behaviors, which I did not recognize at that point in time. I'm saying all of these things because I want people to know I'm very imperfect, I'm flawed, I'm not a great example of a professional in a lot of ways. And that's there with most people you would look towards, who would be quote unquote termed as successful, or 40 under 40 or 30 under 30. So I want people to know very transparently that our own journeys are ones of failure, of challenges, despite privileges. And for those who don't have it, it's more acute. Secondly, that it comes with a degree of emotional growth and maturity which takes place over a period of time. So you have to also be gentle with yourself.
Definitely. I think because, sir, a lot of our viewers right now are students. I think they take a lot of comfort in knowing that even though you aren't in a top law school, as many of us, as most of us are not, you can still have it good. And I think Apar is a great example of that. If you just,
Yeah, but you have to keep trying also, and I think we need to keep improving. So you have to be reflective. So
yeah,
prior to me even participating in one moot, I had to participate in 8 internal moot court selections because we didn't have a yearly calendar. We used
yeah,
to participate in moot by moot, and that really helped me. My seniors, in fact, took a keen interest in developing me, and my skills. And some of them I've had the opportunity of working as a litigator subsequently. So I had great working relationships in law school with people who were 3 to 4 years senior to me. The second is my own batchmates and colleagues were very supportive and appreciative towards me. And I think in retrospect, it's been others who've helped me reach this stage. But it's taken a lot of attempts,
yeah.
and it's taken constant skill building and keeping at it as a discipline. And again, not being narrow minded and selfish about it, but accepting fault towards, in fact, improving yourself.
Right. So, sir, in the next stage, right after law school, you joined a top law firm. You worked for a while with Karanjawala and Co. And then you
Yeah.
later moved on to Colombia. And then you came back to India. So what was
Yeah.
that all like? How was the experience of working with Karanjawala? What made you go abroad and then finally come back?
In the final year of law school, I authored a book on the Information Technology Act. I was very set on going for a master's because I went to Amity, right? And by the time I was graduating in 2007, it didn't have a brand, a value which was equivalent to the national law schools. And I thought over a period of time, that would impact my professional opportunities. And also, to be quite honest, I felt that I had missed out something in terms of scholastic
Yeah,
instruction and
yeah,
professional development, which may be available with the resources and the kind of faculty which is there in national law schools.
yeah,
In retrospect, I think self-learning is can't be there's no alternative towards that,
yeah,
even in a national law school, having subsequently lectured in some of them. Secondly, I was very set on the Rhodes Scholarship, which I didn't eventually get. I only passed towards the interview stages and in the India rounds, and then I subsequently didn't make it. And but Mr. Karanjawala was incredibly kind. He called me in for an interview after I sent in my resume. I wanted to pursue litigation only at an appellate level. So the first few months in that firm were excellent. He, in fact, He My book was published when I graduated, so it was on the Information Technology Act. Mr. Wadhwa also was the publisher, who was Kishan Wadhwa. He was
Mhm.
instrumental in promoting that book, and Mr. Karanjawala sent copies of that book to a lot of senior
Mhm.
advocates in Delhi. He helped make those introductions. I was not that professionally bright at that time to take in and acknowledge the level of support, the mentorship which is being given to me. I think if a senior is taking interest in anyone or a law firm partner like that, um, uh, a person needs to be very appreciative,
Yeah.
especially in the younger years, and recognize that more. So, in retrospect, that's one great thing which happened with me. He placed me to work with teams which had excellent professionals within Karanjawala at that time, some of whom have remained in the firm, whom have worked out, who have opened their own practices. I worked across teams in the original side, which essentially means that fresh suits and filings in the Delhi High Court. I also got to spend a large amount of time with the clerks in the firm, from whom I learned how do you prepare a pleading for drafting, what are the specific processes, how do you study the lists
Mhm.
in terms of forecasting which cases are about to come, which cases are not about to come. I messed up a lot of times. I was too arrogant and boisterous about my work product a lot of times, and I only was given more freedom, patience, and feedback in that form. It was a very healthy atmosphere. So it's just been an excellent experience working in Karanjawala. Now, given that I had already set on a plan for applying for masters, it was about, and I had been accepted into Columbia as well. I had applied only to about 6 schools, I think. So
Mhm.
Oxford, Cambridge, Columbia, Stanford, Harvard, and Yale. And also, I came from Amity, right?
Yeah.
And my scholastic achievement record was great, but I wasn't the batch topper.
Mhm.
Okay, Columbia was very accepting of me. It waived its requirement for 1 year because at the time of application I didn't have any work experience. At the time of joining I would have work
I see.
experience. So I went to Columbia. I was one of the youngest people there.
Oh.
Again, colleagues, professors, they're very warm, supportive towards me. Initially I took courses which are much more structured towards professional development, but then also personal development. I took smaller seminar classes, and the ones which have stayed with me are the smaller seminar classes, in which essentially you get more time in a smaller class number, and there are more assignments on a weekly basis. These were on multiculturalism and the law, and the second one was on legal scholarship,
I
because I
see.
was also interested initially in um, going the academic route, but I decided not to do it because I knew that my skills and my aptitude would not be a good match there. I'm much more of a practitioner. At
Yeah.
that time, I envisioned myself as a practitioner who would like to lecture, a much more academic centered practitioner rather than an academic who practices
I
as
see.
well.
Yeah.
So, that level of identification of inner motivation has been something which has been beneficial to me. The journey has not been without complications,
Yeah.
not without hiccups. When we look at resumes, it's very easy to say, Acha, Apar did this, then he planned this, then he planned that. And it all seems like a smooth ride. It's not actually. Okay. And that's what I would like to um, people to know. The reason why I came back is because, firstly, I would be a first generation immigrant practicing law in a foreign country, and my connection to the law has essentially always been one which is driven, which I discovered later on in my life, out of public issues, social interest, rather than just commercial practice. So I didn't want the immigrant experience because I feel, even though I have somewhat of a anglicized uh, way of looking at things, and I do recognize that now. Even then, I consider myself an Indian. I'm very patriotic towards the calling of the law as a function of nation building. So essentially, also I would like to do much more. And I think when you're a first generation immigrant in another country, you're building life for the next generation,
Oh yeah,
for your children, essentially, if you
definitely.
ever hope to have children, or you achieve success at a later stage, because you're also culturally adapting yourself in addition to the professional setting in which you will be there. Of course, it's easier in metropolitan cities across the world, but still you may face that barrier. And of course, that kind of culture is not reflected in the larger firms, but those kind of opportunities also were a little tough to come by, specifically in the year that I graduated, because in that year, there was the housing mortgage crisis, in which a core segment of the
Yeah,
jobs in the top firms were restricted, and there were massive layoffs happening because the
yeah.
financial sector is very closely tied with the legal services industry, especially in New York. That's more or less my journey out of law school into a firm, and then back. Just one thing: when I was in the firm, I was drafting a lot. I was briefing a lot of seniors. It was an excellent experience because Karanjawala had the top briefs from
Yeah,
the top clients and was briefing the top senior advocates. So I
definitely.
got a very, very good assortment of senior advocates, observing them, how do they conduct themselves inside court, in client conferences. And I had so many positive traits to pick up from them and learnings to pick up from them.
Apar, I think this is a great segue into the next part, because when you returned to India, you set up your own practice, and
Yeah,
before that, you established your firm, which was then acquired, and then practice as an independent counsel. And
yeah.
just now, you were mentioning how you got to interact with a lot of senior advocates while working with Karanjawala. So, how did all of that translate into your independent counsel practice, and what was that experience all like?
I would say it was a degree of accidents and social acquaintances which worked out. So after I came back to India, I worked at Karanjawala for some period of time, again, about a year. I wanted to complete 2 years at Karanjawala. I had a very good experience prior to coming back. I had not done Supreme Court litigation,
Mhm.
and Mr. Karanjawala recognized that was an area where I needed to be focused as well. So he was very invested in my professional growth, and so I did that work. And it's important to understand that technology policy, which is now called tech policy, and IT law was still fairly nascent at that time. It didn't even, it was very embryonic.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it was a viable area of practice. So I was much more of a commercial litigator. Till about 3 years back, I would say it wasn't even an area of practice in which a person could sustain themselves. Now they can, based on all the businesses which have built around it.
Mhm.
So, as I was exiting Karanjawala, I thought that I could open my own independent practice. I opened it, but there were no clients. I don't come from a legal background. Okay. And how do you gain clients? You gain clients on the basis of doing work. So, you have a chicken and egg situation
Mhm.
there. Sometimes people are lucky. Even with my social privileges, all I had was a degree of financial comfort, which is a lot, which is about 80% of
Yeah.
meeting your bare necessities. But setting up your individual practice without having steady clients was a challenge. So then I partnered with two other colleagues. One was a junior from law school, Mr. Animesh Sinha. One was his friend Shashank Garg, and we really bonded well together. So this is how the firm came about. There were some ideas we experimented at that time, and also that was the time of the boutique law firm.
Oh
Okay,
yes.
uh, young people were coming together, setting up boutique law firms, trying to scale them up in a way. And Shashank has done a tremendous job over the years doing that. Animesh went his own way fairly early on, in the Advani journey after we were acquired from Accendo Law Partners, which is what Animesh, Shashank, and I set up together, acquired by Advani and Company, which was a much larger firm. And this happened because there was a specific arbitration which Shashank got engaged on, and Advani was also suggested as a partner, a much more experienced partner to do the work on it. So two law firms servicing the same client and a fairly large arbitration. Advani not having a full team in Delhi, so Mr. Advani saying that why don't you just open a Delhi office or just take over a pre-existing Delhi office? There's not a lot of staff. So that's how that shift happened, accidentally again, right? Shashank, Animesh leaves for his independent practice because he wants to be much more of a hands-on litigator rather than be with much more of a firm setting. Shashank subsequently, after establishing Advani's Delhi's office, leaves for Surya and Company, which leaves me. I'm managing now about 8 lawyers, being the principal fundraiser and doing all these legal tasks, legal reviews as well. And that again happens fairly early in my professional life. It's not a top tier firm. It's not a low tier firm. It's a mid tier firm.
Yeah.
And in certain bands, it's fairly top tier in terms of commercial arbitrations. So a lot of work, a lot of management, a lot of fundraising in terms of the client servicing parts. I think that accelerates my learning almost by accident. I do miss going to courts as frequently as I miss with Karanjawala and Company, and I put certain timelines to myself to transition towards independent practice. And this time it works out because I'm older, I have much more experience, and people know my work.
Yeah, that's true. So, Apar, it's interesting, having worked with top law firms, going to a top law school later to study abroad, and coming back to India and working on commercial matters. So, what led you to finally gravitate towards social issues and build an internet freedom foundation, to quit, active law firm practice and build this rights organization, and to advocate for internet freedom and digital rights?
A few things. I think my experience in Advani had shown that I have an aptitude, at least I was developing an aptitude. I don't think so I was great at it. And my colleagues would certify I was fairly poor. But I love managerial duties, organizational development. I build organizations in a
Yeah.
way. And the second thing was I started the Shreya Singhal case.
Hmm.
I spotted Section 66A, a provision of the IT
Yeah.
Act, because I'd written a commentary, right? And then I started
Yeah.
noticing after 2008, the law changed, etc. And I feared there would be prosecutions happening. And there was a lot of writing happening at that time. So I was writing a bit on it.
Hmm.
I was also lecturing, etc. Which is a natural accompanying towards legal practice, nothing very radical. So I started doing the Shreya Singhal case, working with PUCL, working with Mr. Sanjay Parekh, Karuna Nandi, who were seniors to me, gave me excellent
Hmm.
advice and support. And through that process, I actually discovered that I have a passion for public law, constitutional law, what we call it, which is that I never, I think, grew out of my second year romanticism of why I went to law school,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now the big question mark was, how do I do this effectively? Number one, and number two, how do I do this in a way in which it's commercially viable, in a way,
Hmm.
for me?
Yeah.
I can make a living out of it, and this also happens by accident. I have fairly good networks with media professionals. One of them, Mr. Nikhil Pava, who runs Media Nama, um, right after the Shreya Singhal judgment, in which I'm now acting for PUCL, which is in March. There's a consultation on network neutrality. He visualizes, he envisions a large public movement around it, but he needs lawyers like
Yeah.
me who know what network neutrality is, to write
Yeah.
the responses, to design the strategy response with respect to the TRA. And I've been sending comments to the TRA even as a student.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
that geeky. Yeah. So, uh, yeah, so things also, some parts of my personality have always been weird. I've believed in government. I believed in engaging with government for a long period of time, responsibly engaging with institutions, building their ability, and a fairly low degree of embarrassment and shame as to my own ignorance. So, if I send a comment as a student, it may not be perfect, it may
Yeah.
not be great, but I do engage and I keep improving it. So
Yeah.
he reaches out to me, Nikhil reaches out to me. We do the network neutrality movement together, in which I work with uh, several colleagues. Some of them are stand up artists. The entire AIB crew or the entire
Oh,
roster of Only Much Louder, vetting each script for legal risk,
oh.
because they all made videos on network neutrality,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
much more importantly, writing up the responses with two other colleagues, Amba Kak and Ramanjeet Singh Chima, on what are the responses in the email which are sent by everyone,
I
which is
see.
prefaced over a longer document which we make, and we do it almost as an accident. The network neutrality movement blows up
Yeah.
again. Big credits to not only Nikhil but also Kiran, who is at HasGeek,
Oh,
which is the community
yeah.
building and events company out of Bangalore,
Hmm.
who sets up all the tech. We work fairly closely together, all of us. That also includes Rohin Dharma Kumar, who's the co-founder of the Ken. So there
Oh,
were all these incredible people I got
yeah.
to work with. Um, we lacked diversity, sadly. We didn't have enough women with us. One person who was very core part of this was Rachita Taneja, the creator of sanitary panels, who used to
Oh,
work in Jhatka, who told us how to engage with people and build
wow.
a constant, regular basis. I got to work with this, and I consider myself so lucky. So after the network neutrality movement was seeping off, I was still practicing. I was
Yeah.
still doing my work. My individual practice was picking up very, very well. And in
Hmm.
fact, the last year, which I quit individual practice, I conducted at least, I think so, about 75 to 80 briefs for about 30 clients.
Oh,
Large clients had started coming in, and my practice was commercially roaring. I had
yeah.
three juniors, I had two clerks, and my clientele was also gravitating towards much more larger Fortune 500 companies. Now, a lot of them
Oh,
Silicon Valley companies, but I didn't want to do that because I'd done Shreya Singhal and I'd
right.
done network neutrality. And
Yeah.
what that taught me was, if I want social change based on the constitutional vision, I need to go beyond even strategic litigation. Because if I'm doing strategic litigation, then I'm limiting my area of action and centering it only towards one arm of government of the state, which is the judiciary. I ideally need to also get into legislative support and analysis, look at houses of legislature and parliament, uh, engage with government authorities, which are the executive bodies, regulators, but there is no substitute for public movement and understanding and literacy around digital rights, which is a greenfield issue. India does not have anything similar to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, to digital rights wings, such as the California chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, Liberty International, Open Rights Group in the United Kingdom, or the European Digital Rights Initiative. We had research bodies
Yeah.
such as Center for Internet Society, Center for Communication Governance. And if you noticed over about 2 years back, they were very academically centered. They were not that heavily invested in public communication, constituency building, etc. So that's how I entered IFF, with a vision of advancing constitutional values, bridging the gap between public policy and the public, and essentially using the wider set of tools beyond court litigation, which are available towards advancing these goals. Setting up public movements and campaigns, building constituencies of literacy, then taking all that power of the informed crowd and those values towards institutional goals, which can be done systematically through evidence and policy and research, which is already being done by CIS, by CCG, by Internet Democracy, by APT Institute, by Tandem Research, by all of these institutions which are starting. And here the vision really crystallized of being Indian funded, membership based, which complements our values. A large part of this came from now the trustees
Yeah,
of IFF, who were the founders of the network neutrality movement.
I
People
see.
like Ramanjeet Singh Chima, Rachita Taneja, Arvind, who is a techie who's had a startup which was funded, then managed teams in a large company, again is doing a startup, who comes from IIT and IIM. Karthik, who coded the platform. Unfortunately, there's also always over a period of time a certain level of mismatch of vision. So Kiran, who's the co-founder, who remains broadly supportive of IFF, or at that point in time signified he wouldn't be able to give time. His vision was different towards setting of communities. He exited, and also Nikhil Pava exited in a very public manner. I'm grateful to both of them also, because when they exited, they indicated certain faults which have actually inputted into our thinking. And I mean, R is the collective leadership of IFF, and helped us actually look at areas in a different manner, be more community centric, both with respect to our work, but also with respect to our funding. So this is what we do now. We have a complete strategic litigation vertical. We are rapid response. We engage with the public, and we're slowly building a cadre of supporters, strengthen staff, our finances through a transparent and public-based model.
Fantastic. Apar, we can continue talking, and I'm really enjoying being in conversation with you, but we do have to stop at some point.
It's
So,
up to you. It's up to you whenever you want to stop.
no, no,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, certainly, certainly. So I was just saying that now I'll come to the final bits of the questions that I have. You know,
Yeah.
so Apar, this lockdown has really revealed that we are actively moving towards more and more digitalization, and the
Yeah.
same goes for law. We have already seen that matters are being heard in courts in the online mode. E-filing has begun. Gujarat High Court is even live streaming its proceedings, and so on. So in the times to come, Apar, how do you see the practice of law changing? Of course, there are some conspiracy theories which are a little too far-fetched, which suggest that will become redundant in totality and that tech will take over. But how do you see the practice of law keeping up with tech and changing?
So I had a very good colleague who joined as an intern. Her name is Tanya. She gifted me a book, The Future of the Legal Profession. It's by that family of academics and lawyers, one of them, Suskind.
Ah,
So I think that describes it very well. What's the future of the legal profession? I think that lower level work will get automated through AI in terms of form filling, etc. So there may have been an impact as processes improve on legal services such as trademark filing, patent filing, etc. They may also get more specialized in certain areas, but that's one thing you'll notice happening, like ROC filings, etc. It's already happening, right? Those kind of platforms are building out. Secondly, I think more actionable insights and software-based insights, which may lead to bad code. I'm leaving the value judgments to others,
yeah.
but essentially getting a better sense of expertise in which algorithms will be able to design what are the best arguments lawyers need to make or
Oh,
should
wow.
make, and before with judges also based on actionable insight through court orders. Judges may not like it. A lot of conventional lawyers may not like it, but it may serve a greater degree of value for litigants.
Mhm.
Docketing will increase in efficiency, will clean up hopefully. Delays will be reduced. But there'll be a tremendous flip side. This level of digitization which is happening will also cause tremendous amounts of exclusion.
Mm.
It may cause a degree of injustice as well if it's only procedural and relying on quantitative based outcomes in terms of how many cases get over in how much time, rather than looking at the substantive quality of the justice which is so rendered. For instance, if you're challaned right now in Delhi for driving a vehicle, you can't substantively dispute it, even though it goes to a traffic court,
True,
right?
true.
And there's sometimes Mr. Huzaifa Ahmadi, for instance, in a interview with Bar and Bench, has quite well set out why physical hearing is a necessity, especially in large, complex matters
Yeah.
which are requiring in-person attendance. So I think in certain areas, physical hearing, especially for, excuse me, large constitutional adjudications, as well as for litigants who don't have these traditional facilities or even the kind of social learning. If they have this 4G connection on a smartphone, doesn't mean that they'll be able to very adeptly navigate
Yeah.
this level of virtual hearings. Okay, so we do need to make it all human centric and keep thinking about first principles. The first principles being the administration of justice is not towards efficiency, it's towards delivery of justice, and efficiency is a component of delivery of justice. So it's about justice, right? And secondly, it doesn't need to be a pain. And third, it just doesn't need to be there itself. If a conflict exists and can be settled, and this is entirely the vision of the Lok Adalat movement, it needs to be reflected. Should not be penalized through processes of legal proceedings in civil or in criminal matters. So I do think there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of opportunities. Remote hearings will happen, transparency should increase. We are walking towards a path which is good, but there's a greater concern because we're also passing through a very difficult time in history where there's an incredible amount of power consolidation happening, this fracture in our society around identity politics, there's growing communalization, and quite often there's an erosion of trust in the higher judiciary,
Mm.
especially around constitutional adjudications, because they quite often answer political questions, which would put the political executive in inconvenient positions, and the political executive exercising a great degree of control over the judiciary through informal and formal means, because it's fairly powerful and centered at this present moment.
Right. And so, Apar, and this is the question, I usually ask towards the end to all my guests. Um, are there any books, movies, or anything like that that you'd, like to recommend to everyone, that everyone should read these or watch these movies, or anything artsy that you would like to recommend to our viewers?
Yeah, I'll just make. So I watch a lot of movies. The Marathi movie Court is
Yeah.
excellent, even though it doesn't describe the legal proceedings in a very accurate manner, but it does show that lawyers are human.
Yeah.
Lawyers go through incredible amount of stress. They do solitary jobs, and it also shows how the legal operation quite often targets people such as the Kabir Kalamanch. The other movie I would recommend, which was very influential for me because I come from a generation which is, I think so, I can say I'm a early millennial in that sense, and people who maybe they are called Gen Z.
Yeah.
So it's called And Justice for All. It
Yeah.
picks up on the Metallica song. It's a movie in which Al Pacino is there
Yeah.
and he's forced into a Faustian bargain. And I have a poster of it right here in my room,
Oh, wow.
which reads that the man needs the best lawyer in town, but the problem is he is the best lawyer in town. And Al
Oh,
Pacino is in a jail on a contempt charge, and he's a lawyer. Okay. So it speaks to very troubling times. It's a movie on gender justice also. So please do watch it. It was influential to me in my childhood, also towards picking up the vocation of law. Um, uh, to each their own, and I look forward to also recommendations which others can make towards me. Please don't recommend The Good Wife because I've watched all of it.
So, Apar, any final comments before we conclude this meeting?
No, no, thank you. I'm sorry if I was very self-indulgent through
Not at
this
all.
interview process. I encourage younger people to engage with the Internet Freedom Foundation. We also have a forum where I'm available. Our staffers are available. We encourage people to come to the forum than just social media, because we can have sustained conversations there. We can write more, right, and respond genuinely rather than just broadcasting that. And the address for that is forum.internetfreedom.in. There are a lot of lawyers, there are a lot of people who are techies who work in Bangalore based or Silicon Valley companies. There are academics there. So I look forward to conversation there. Please do reach out to me and my colleagues. We learn from you as much as we hope to offer our learnings if they may be of any use to you.
Great. I will attach a link to the forum in the description section, so be sure to check that out. Apar, thank you so much for joining me today on this Saturday morning. It was an excellent, excellent conversation, and I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for being in conversation today with me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.